First of all, thank you very much. As many of you know, I'm really excited about blue economy and what opportunities it brings. So thank you for this opportunity to present this topic today. So what is blue economy? So before we can start to talk about sustainability and maritime technologies, that's an important first question to ask. Why it is important? Because it is quite wide and it can mean different things to different people. And where does that problem come from is that generally it refers to activities connected to the sea and coastal regions. But interestingly enough, there is no single universally agreed definition for it. So for some people, the blue economy means using marine resources sustainably. That supports economic development while also protecting the sea or ocean health. For others, it simply means all economic activities related to the sea, whether they are sustainable or not. But over the past decades, ocean-related industries certainly have expanded rapidly. And traditionally, this was described as the ocean economy or the sea economy, and included sectors like shipping, offshore energy. Historically, that meant oil and gas, of course, ports, shipbuilding, and so on. But as concerns about climate change, biodiversity loss, and marine pollution have grown, then the discussion has also gradually shifted towards sustainability. And this is where the term sustainable blue economy became more widely used. So the first takeaway is that there is no universally agreed definition. And I'll try to explain more in detail how we are looking at it in our project MarTe. Now, the European Union journey to sustainable blue economy has changed over the past decade. When we look back at 2012, then the main focus was what was called blue growth. Essentially how to unlock the economic potential of the sea by expanding maritime industries, creating jobs, and also improving competitiveness. A major turning point came with the European Green Deal, which introduced a broader goal of making Europe's climate neutral by 2050. This brought sustainability and circular economy principles, biodiversity protection, clean energy transition much more strongly into EU policy discussions, and that including maritime sectors. And then in 2021, the EU introduced a new approach, the transition from blue growth to sustainable blue economy. And this was important conceptual shift. The idea here is no longer simply economic growth from the sea, but growth with ecological limits. In practice, what does it mean? Reducing carbon emissions, developing offshore renewable energy, greening maritime transport, ports, protecting marine ecosystem, but also creating jobs and innovation, but in a more sustainable way. So in simple terms, the sea is no longer viewed as a resource for economic growth, but as a living system that also needs protection, restoration, and long-term resilience. Now, more recently, this direction was strengthened further through the European Oceans Pact, which brings together EU ocean-related policies into one integrated framework. It connects environmental protection, blue economy competitiveness, coastal communities, innovation, even talks about maritime security, ocean governments, and as a single approach. And what is particularly important here is that sustainability, resilience, innovation, and all these topics are no longer treated separately. So that's our journey, let's say, policy-wise. And as I mentioned that looking at economic sectors, there is no, and as there is no universally agreed definition or even universally agreed sectors, then in the MarTe project, we used the blue economy concept according to the 2025 EU Blue Economy Report. So this report identifies 7 established, and I stress established, blue economy sectors. And these are marine living resources, marine non-living resources, port activities, shipbuilding and repair, maritime transport, marine renewable energy, and coastal tourism. Each of these sectors include a range of related subsectors, but established sectors provide the foundation for how MarTe understands and approaches blue economy. Furthermore, I would like to point out that in MarTe, we needed to narrow the scope further in order to match the project's focus on marine technologies. So we are mainly looking at blue economy activities that happen at sea. There are, of course, economic activities also that happen on land, but our primary focus is the marine environment itself. The main exception is ports, because ports are the key interface between the land and the sea and enable maritime activities to happen. Now coming to how we look at sustainability at MarTe. One interesting challenge in the Baltic region is that EU and HELCOM approach on sustainability a little bit differs. At the EU level, sustainable blue economy policy is strongly driven by decarbonization and reducing CO2 emissions and talks about renewable offshore energy and so on. But in the Baltic Sea region, HELCOM focuses more on issues like eutrophication and marine pollution. In other words, the specific environmental pressures affecting Baltic Sea water quality. So while the overall sustainability goals are similar, the priorities are not always exactly the same. The EU focuses more on climate impacts globally, while HELCOM focuses more on the regional environmental conditions of the Baltic Sea. And following from that, in MarTe, we define sustainability primarily through the environmental pressures affecting the Baltic Sea. We use the HELCOM Baltic Sea Action Plan as the framework to understand what the key environmental pressures are, and you can see it on the right-hand side, of this picture. What causes them? Those are on the left-hand side, and how economic activities contribute to them. This slide actually illustrates it well. You see that largest source of nutrients actually comes from agriculture. However, other activities play a role for most other pressures. If we look at the maritime transport, for example, it contributes to exhaust emissions. Now, greenhouse gas emissions are not directly included in HELCOM's framework, but in MarTe, we still consider them as an additional pressure relevant for marine technologies. So, considering this, the main question for us becomes, how can marine technologies help these pressures while supporting sustainable blue economy activities? So bear this question in mind, and we will look at technologies a little bit later during the webinar. Now, I would like us to look at trends and future trends. Global trends are continuously pushing economic activities from land towards the sea. This may reduce some environmental pressures on land, but it can also increase pressure on marine ecosystem, like I just showed you. The future blue economy is shaped by a combination of political, economic, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors. For example, EU policies such as Green Deal and Oceans Pact are strengthening integrated ocean governments. That we know, that's our basis. But we also have started to see that as anchors are dropping, geopolitics and security are becoming increasingly important. On economic side, activities are gradually shifting from land to sea. And why is that there is a demand for food and also energy? We see offshore energy and aquaculture expanding. Climate change is creating risks and new opportunities. Regulations are becoming more complex, but at the same time offering opportunities, and technologies such as AI or autonomous systems, digital monitoring, these are all rapidly transforming. Now, one topic that I would also like to bring out is the social aspect, that coastal communities remain highly dependent on, for example, tourism and fisheries, but traditional livelihoods are changing, especially with offshore energy and sustainable aquaculture emerging. Local communities are gaining greater influence in coastal governance and development decisions. And in our region, there is also resistance. And this brings me to my last slide and to my last point. I would like to add a perspective that is very specific to the Baltic region and that we rarely see reflected in European, let's say, blue economy policy documents. When we talk about the blue economy today, we usually talk about offshore energy, ports, shipping, maritime innovation, right? But in the Baltics, the story is also about our history and about our identity. 100 years ago, coastal communities here were deeply connected to the sea. Shipbuilding existed locally. Trade routes connected even small villages internationally. And maritime knowledge was part of everyday life. The sea was not only an economic resource, it was part of our culture, community, and regional identity. That relationship changed during the occupation when coastlines became restricted and highly controlled. Over time, many traditional maritime practices disappeared, and the sea became associated with borders and security rather than openness and exchange. And now, because of this history, the Baltic blue economy is not only about green transition and economic growth, it is also about reconnecting people with the sea. So today the challenge is not just to build new maritime industries, but it's also to restore coastal connectivity, revive the maritime heritage and skills, also protect, of course, the ecosystem and create sustainable livelihoods for future generations. So in many ways, our story is about reconnection and renewal. And that gives a Baltic approach to the blue economy a very human dimension in my mind. So thank you for your attention. And this concludes my introduction to blue economy. Do you have any questions?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Tiina. We have time for one very, very quick question. Any volunteers? Everybody's just like baffled. I have one question, very quick. Might be a bit challenging, but it's a little bit also a little bit like philosophical. While historically you showed very well how blue economy was kind of like developing bottom up. Now the whole concept is quite complicated and complex with interlinkages towards different levels. Do you think who has the most responsibility in helping the blue economy develop in the right direction?
I think it's a combined responsibility. I think that it's a combined responsibility. Yeah. I don't think that it's just the policy makers or companies or governments, or it's a combined responsibility. And I think from that perspective also the way we work and the way MarTe is put together through different helix groups is also a showcase of that.
So if we work well together, then the blue economy
then we can achieve it. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good conclusion.
I try to ask one more question to Tiina. So we speak about blue economy in general. So we combine all seas, not only Baltic Sea, but also oceans and Mediterranean. How do you feel? Is any technical or social aspects what are completely different, for example, for Mediterranean and Baltic and Atlantic Ocean, or it could be multiplied and transferred to all communities?
Yeah, when I went through all these documents that underline this blue economy approach in EU, and why I added this last slide about the Baltics and where do we come from, that it is a feeling that it talks about quite a lot about this regeneration and how jobs are changing. But actually, in our case, a lot of it that we have a bigger void than some other, let's say, coastal communities or coastal countries. When we talk about, we cannot say that we are in same condition or same place as the Mediterranean from that perspective. But of course, EU documents they talk about let's say the average or average approach. But I think that here locally we have to also look at our local situation. Yeah.